We're just going to go back. If cooperative or dual federalism is like a layer cake, then cooperative federalism would be like a marble cake. Okay, so they had powers that were shared, looking more like, as mixed between the national and the state governments. But let's look at devolution for a second. And that was basically started with Richard Nixon and his new federalism. It was transferring responsibility from the federal government to state and local governments. Okay, so state and local governments mostly responsible for handling crime, welfare, education, and Nixon wanted to, give more power to the states. Okay, what happened was that happened quite a bit, and where the states had more power, and let's look at a couple things here. The Republican Congress of let's see, what was it? I think it was 104th Congress. Was concerned about devolution and giving the states more power, so they wanted to do that. But so they let like states, or they repealed like federal speed limits. They gave states more latitude dealing with welfare and prisoners seeking relief in federal courts instead of state courts and stuff. So that happened. But then soon after, Republicans looked at we're kind of less concerned about those principles, and they're turning more to the federal government and restricting state power after a while. They found it more effective way to achieve a wide range of their policy goals. And then one of the things that George W. Bush did was Congress passed the No Child Left Behind Act, which was an education bill or education law, and basically it was the largest expansion of federal role in education since Lyndon Johnson's Great Society, which gave more federal intrusion into the state domain of education, more so than in any time in U.S. history. So a lot of states complain loudly about that. They also complain loudly about the cost of implementing the legislation. Also, probably same thing is happening with probably a little bit with the Affordable Health Care Act too. Okay, let's look at fiscal federalism. Okay, which is a key part of sharing powers with the federal and state governments. So fiscal federalism, pattern of spending, taxing, providing grants in the federal system. Okay, federal grants to states, local government have grown to about $600 billion per year. So states and in fact many cities have lobbyists in Washington D.C. So they're sure to get some federal grants that are out there. And especially since the economic crisis in 2008, 2009, grants have increased in 2010, 2011 due to the economic stimulus package passed by Congress there. You can see a estimate and a graph on how many millions of dollars go to the states and local governments. Okay, so let's talk about the grant system. And the grant system basically distributes the federal pie. And there are certain types of grants. One is categorical, and it's a project grant and formula grants, and they're used by the states and local governments for specific purposes. And a lot of them have strings attached. Okay, an example would be that if the state gets a grant or a local government, they have to follow the Equal Opportunity Act of 1982, which bars job discrimination. So there are certain conditions that are attached to the grants, categorical grants, that states receive from the federal government. Okay, two types of categorical grants, and if they come up with that, are project grants and formula grants. Project grants are the more common type, and then there are formula grants, and the states basically have to follow a formula to receive the grant. Okay, a lot of complaints about categorical grants because there are a lot of strings attached. So other ones that Congress or states seem to favor more, of course, are block grants, and they support programs in community development, social services. They're more like, they kind of give more discretion to the state to spend the money. Like, here's a load of money, you spend as you see fit. Okay, so there is a lot of federal money out there, and there is a big scramble for it. The federal government likes to think there's something for everybody, so a lot of states, share these federal grants. No, like one state is getting a lot more than another. Okay, looking at mandate blues, sometimes mandates are that the states have to comply with federal rules. Okay, either under threat of penalties or as a condition of receipt of another federal grant. So it's almost like, you better follow this or you're not going to get your money somewhere else, type of thing. So the states obviously don't like that. And there are also some unfunded mandates by Congress, and those are very, the states very much do not like unfunded mandates because then it's up to the states to raise the money for it, and sometimes that is a very big financial burden on the states. Like I was talking about, the No Child Left Behind Act passed in 2002 threatened school systems with the loss of federal funds if they did not improve student performance. But really, there was not that much funding for it, and the states had a hard time funding that No Child Left Behind Act. Okay, let's look at a little bit at this. I'm going to kind of go quick here because this is a little bit less important here, federalism and democracy. Federalism increases access to government because there are a bunch of levels of government there. Local problems can be solved locally, not looking to a national or federal government. It's hard for political parties to dominate all politics in a federal system also. And let's look here and go on. The difference is that some states are very much different in their public services than other states. Sometimes local interests can counteract and impede national interests. Okay, and there are quite a few governments in a federal system in the United States, 89,527 American governments. Okay, which we're talking about municipalities like Vallecito's Water District or the California Coastal Commission, stuff like that. So it gets pretty, large amount of governments. Kind of makes it a little difficult to make policy or follow policy. Okay, here's a little list here. U.S. government, the states, county governments are 3,000, municipalities, townships, school districts, special districts, total 89,527, and that's in 2010. Okay, so quite a lot of levels of government there. Okay, I'm going to move on and summarize. So federalism is a way of organizing a nation where two levels of government have formal authority over the same area and people, which means the federal government and the state governments share power. Okay, constitutional basis. Articles in the Constitution divides power between national government and state governments, made the national government supreme within its sphere, okay, with the supremacy clause, and with its implied powers, which was made clear in the Supreme Court case McCulloch versus Maryland. The Civil War actually helped establish national supremacy again. Okay, some constitutional basis. You really need to go through that, but full faith and credit to public acts, records, and civil judicial proceedings of other states, extradition, and privileges and immunities. Okay, that should be reciprocity there. I'll let you look at the questions if you want to pause and check out the question. Intergovernment relations of a federalist society today. States no longer have exclusive responsibility for government functions that are within its sphere, but instead share these responsibilities with the federal government. Because of federal government, I guess you could say intrusion into typical state stuff like education and policies like that. Okay, through categorical and block grants, the federal government provides state and local governments with substantial portions of their budget, and it uses that money to influence policy by sometimes attaching conditions. Okay, so the main grants that states like to have are block grants because they have more leeway in how to spend that money. And sometimes the federal government gives out categorical grants, which certain conditions are attached to it, and you need to spend it in one area. Okay, some positives and negatives you can read there. Okay, so federalism basically is this system of government that the United States follows. It's not, nowhere in the Constitution does it say we have a federal government. But at that time, it just seemed like the practical way to run our government because we were very dispersed back in the late 1700s, early 1800s. There was no way that, there was really no way that the American government or the Constitution could have even been a unitary government because the people would have just never ratified. The states would have never ratified the Constitution because the last thing they wanted was another autocratic government like the King of England and Parliament there. So the last thing they wanted was anything like that. So they made a whole new government, and federalism became their system of government just because of the disbursement of the people, the large size of the states, and they thought it would be the best way to, and because of loyalty to the states. That was a big thing too. Okay, that's it. See ya.